Well, now Greenpeace has been around for for such a long time. It was founded in 1971 and today is present in more than 40 countries. Leading TV presenter and radio broadcaster Laura Whitmore talks now to the executive director of Greenpeace UK, John Sauven, about the climate emergency and what we can all do to combat it.
Welcome to Climate Action Live. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Laura. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited to get Greenpeace involved with Climate Action Live. And I guess the first question is, how urgent is the climate change issue?
Well, I think that one can gauge that from the headlines that are just almost, hitting us daily. I think one of the real frustrations about this whole thing in terms of how urgent it is, being the age that I am, I remember Margaret Thatcher in 1989 making a speech about climate change and the fact that this would have huge planetary impacts. And in fact, she made a speech the following year, actually comparing climate change to the Gulf War. That's how serious she thought it was. Now, that is more than 3 decades ago, the Prime Minister of the UK was talking in those kinds of terms, using that kind of language. And of course, then you had the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. All the world leaders attended. I mean, the American president was there, all the European leaders, everybody was there. They all signed up to 3 really critical things. One was action on climate change. The second one was on the extinction crisis, on tackling biodiversity loss. And the third thing was on sustainable development. Now, that was 3 decades ago that they all signed pledges to tackle those 3 big issues. Now you fast forward to today, and you think they just woke up last night to these issues. Everyone's sort of, oh my God, there's a climate emergency. Well, yes, you've been talking about it for more than 30 years. So then you have to ask yourself, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? And when you say you've just got 1 decade left to halve emissions, otherwise we're toast. Well, 30 years ago, you had 40 years in which to deal with this crisis. And that would have made it a hell of a lot easier if you dealt with it 40 years ago. So, this basically, when you look at it, has been the biggest scandal that we have ever faced in our history, because fossil fuel companies have spent the last 30 to 40 years denying the science, obstructing the science, obstructing action, paying politicians. It's just extraordinary. And if it wasn't for the absolutely relentless campaigning by lots of people, scientists, campaigners, even some progressive businesses and some progressive politicians, we would still be in that phase today. But thankfully, that pressure today has begun to have some impact.
I want to ask you, I want to break it down. What are the stages of change that we're going to see now? And when are these changes likely to occur?
Well, I think that, look, first of all, there are 2 issues related to this. One is climate change is happening now and it's having profound impacts now. So you only have to look at the fires that have ravaged Australia or California or the Amazon or the droughts that are happening across large swathes of particularly countries around the north, around the equator. But also when you look at the bigger things which are happening, for example, you see the fires that are now burning out of control in the boreal forests in Canada and Russia. You look at the massive methane emissions coming out of the permafrost melting across Siberia. You look at the withdrawing Arctic sea ice. Almost certainly the sea ice in the summer will have gone within a decade or 2. You look at the melting happening in Greenland. You look at the collapsing ice sheets in West Antarctica. Even East Antarctica is becoming unstable. You look at even the Amazon, which is a huge source of carbon, a huge store of carbon, is beginning to tip the other way. So I think that what you can see is that as we cross planetary boundaries, you're reaching these kind of tipping points where these systems are beginning to collapse like dominoes. And I think that that's the thing which really frightens scientists, because, we're heading into a world that we haven't probably seen for 3 to 5 million years. And certainly CO2 emissions today are higher than they've ever been in the history of human civilization. So, this is quite uncharted territory that we're entering into. But certainly it's a pretty dystopian world that scientists are painting a picture of. And that's why this is so urgent, because, when you look at it in terms of what is really holding back the dam, it's our oceans, because the oceans are absorbing about 95% of our excess heat is being, that's why the oceans are warming, why they're becoming more acidic, is because all the excess heat that we're putting into the atmosphere, the oceans are sucking that up. But of course, we don't know how long the oceans will continue doing that for. And of course, if the oceans didn't absorb our excess heat, then we really would be in trouble.
Now, what can we do? Because as individuals, sometimes it feels so overwhelming, John. It's like, what can the individual do? Because it's so big. The problem is such a vast scale that, what can we do? Is there any point? What can we do as an individual person? Should we let someone else try and make change? What can we do, someone watching this at home right now?
All we need to do, first of all, is get off coal. Now, the UK has got off coal, more or less, right? But China, for example, is still building a lot of new coal-fired power stations. There's still a lot of new coal mines opening up around the world. We've got to stop that. You've just got to stop burning coal, full stop, right? There is endless sources of energy that can come from the sun, the wind, from hydro, from tidal, from geothermal. It's the enormous potential that we have today, the technologies to harness vast amounts of energy. This is all to do with political will. The technology exists, but you need the political support, you need the political will to make this happen. So that's one thing. Technically, this is all completely feasible to change our energy system. The second thing that we need to do is basically have a more plant-based diet. Look, we're ravaging the rainforests and ecosystems of the world to graze animals and grow a lot of animal feed. I mean, when I look at Latin America, for example, I look at the huge systems like the Amazon rainforest and so on. It's being burnt down to graze cattle and grow soya to feed our pigs and chickens. It's insane. The industrial meat industry is completely out of control. So all I would say is two things we need: renewable energy and a more plant-based diet. That's it.
Our core message today, John, is no climate action, no peace. What does that mean to you?
One, it's about the energy system, whether it's conflict over oil or other resources. But two, it's in terms of the impacts of climate change, because billions of people live around coastal cities. With sea level rise, those coastal cities will be threatened. With droughts, people's ability to feed themselves will be threatened. The whole thing about creating a stable climate is actually to create stable and sustainable livelihoods for people. And I think that this is where the peace aspect of it is so critically important. We're now moving into a new climate, a new world, which will threaten all of our existence. But of course, that will threaten peace. That will lead to more conflict. There will be much more, challenges in terms of people's ability to feed themselves, to get clean drinking water, to provide for their families, and so on and so forth. So I think that climate change and peace are one and the same thing.
We all have that responsibility then as well, don't we, for the next generations? I've just had a baby recently, and I worry because I worry what we're doing for, it's not just for us now, it's for our next generations to come and what we're creating around us, isn't it? We have to look forward to building that future, not just for us.
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I think the intergenerational thing is a really, really important issue. I mean, I'm a baby boomer. I've had all of the benefits of living in a society that didn't care about what it was doing to the ecosystems, to the planetary health, to what we were leaving for future generations. And of course, for my kids and your kids, it is that future that we're leaving them, which is, of course, now got massive environmental debt, and they're going to have to deal with cleaning up that mess. And I think that that's why, I do feel a personal responsibility for the future that I am leaving them, and why I've dedicated my life to trying to leave them a better world. Because otherwise, I think, yes, their life is going to be very hard, but it's not their life. They're going to be joined by the time they're 50 or 60, they're going to be, joined by 10 billion other people. And this is going to put a huge pressure on all of the people who are living on planet Earth if we cannot create a more stable climate.
Being positive, looking forward, you work with Greenpeace. Peace is there, Greenpeace. What do you want to do? Because I know you guys are doing so much. You work relentlessly. What do you want people to do to help Greenpeace?
Look, I think the most important thing is, you said before, oh, well, this is quite overwhelming. What can I do as an individual? And I do really think that what is most important is that people do feel empowered as an individual. Because look, when I look at the issue around plant-based diet, I'm enormously hopeful because a lot of young people are taking up the issue of having a more plant-based diet. That's leading to new businesses. It's leading to new investment. The industrial meat industry now feels under threat. And the same as the coal industry does as well, both in terms of government pressure and new regulations, and also from the fact that renewable energy is now much cheaper and much more efficient and much more effective. So I do feel there are disruptors coming along, and I feel that young people are really important part of the disruption that is happening in terms of the choices that they are making. And of course, everyone should join also organizations and get more active and more engaged in their community or their workplace. Because I think that's really important. People need to use their voice. People need to shout louder.
I think you're right. And I love that, we're feeling empowered, because it is overwhelming, but we want to get all those feelings and become empowered. And that's why today is so special. And I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.